Yeah. Right. Good morning and welcome. So welcome to all attendees for this, the first meeting of the Environment and Housing Scrutiny Board. A particularly warm welcome to the newly elected members who are joining the Scrutiny Board for the first time. My name is Councillor Ed Carlisle. I am chairing today's meeting. Apologies that I forgot to bring biscuits. And apologies as well if I get anything wrong. I've not chaired a Scrutiny Board before, but I welcome all your feedback. Can I remind attendees that this meeting is webcast, and the link to review the recording live is on the meeting webpage. For the benefit of any members of the public watching the webcast, members of the Scrutiny Board will now be invited to introduce themselves first. So I will ask members, councillors first, starting on my left, to introduce themselves. Thank you.
Good morning, Councillor Kate Hay, Farning Wortley Ward.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Andy Parnham, and I'm councillor in Armley Ward.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Javed Akhtar, Little London and Woodhouse Ward.
Good morning, Eleanor Thompson, councillor in Guiseley and Rawdon Ward.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Shaf Ali from Beeston Holbeck Ward.
Richard Barker, councillor for Temple Newsham.
Good morning, Councillor Dawn Seary, Pudsey Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Diane Chapman from Rothwell Ward.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Sam Firth from the Harewood Ward.
Good morning, everyone. Eden Hills, Little London Woodhouse Ward.
And Becky, do you want to introduce yourself?
Becky Atherton, Principal Scrutiny Advisor to the Board.
And I'll ask members, officers and others, executive members will get the opportunity to introduce themselves during their relevant sections, please. And just a reminder, yes, so press the push to talk button when you're speaking, and when you finish, please just turn it off. Thank you. Becky, could I hand over to you for the initial items?
Thank you, Chair. Item 1, appeals. We've got no appeals today. Item 2, no exclusions today. Item 3, we've got no late items of business. Item 4, can I ask members to disclose any interests in accordance with Leeds City Council's Code of Conduct? I'll take silence as none. And then 5, apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Farmer today, and Councillor Firth is attending as a substitute. John Woolmer has also asked me to note his apologies, but he's got his representatives from the service here instead.
Great. And then for another exciting one, for the item 6, which is the terms of reference, this report sets out the board's terms of reference as agreed by council at the AGM on the 20th of May. Can I invite you, Becky, to highlight the key information?
Yes, Chair. As you say, this sets out the arrangements as agreed by Council at the AGM. The key pages for members to take note of are Appendix 1 on page 7, which is your general terms of reference. 9 to 16 sets out Article 6 of the Constitution, which outlines Scrutiny Board remits and any special responsibilities allocated to the Board. And then your specific remit is set out on page 19. Members are just being asked to note the report for information today.
Many thanks. Another administrative one, item 7 about co-opted members. This report highlights the provision made within the Council's constitution for the appointment of co-opted members onto scrutiny boards. Can I invite you, Becky, to highlight the key information?
Again, this is one of our annual administrative reports for members. All boards have the facility to co-opt members should they wish to do so. You can either co-opt 5 non-voting members up until the next AGM, or 2 non-voted members for a particular scrutiny inquiry or piece of work. This board has no legislative requirements to co-opt any members and doesn't typically co-opt or for this remit. My advice to the board would be to take that approach again this year and to invite external stakeholders to come in as required for individual pieces of work to inform your consideration during the year.
Any questions so far? Councillor Akhtar?
I mean, will it make life easier if we do have a co-op member, especially with those who live and work in those areas, and they have knowledge of the, for example, environment. Some of the residents that I deal with in my neck of the wood, and I feel that they probably will go through more sort of issues which affect their own communities. But I mean, it's up to the board, and if it's not legal requirement, I mean, I'll shut up. But it's just I'm just thinking loud. It should be given the opportunity. I remember one of our local resident. She's retired now. She's very old, but she used to come onto the board, and she was asset to the board with her experience. But it's just I'm just thinking. I was just thinking loud.
Thank you, Councillor Akhtar. Councillor Haigh.
Yeah, thanks. I think I'm content with the proposal because we do have a wide-ranging remit. It would be difficult to identify one or two individuals, and certainly I think regarding Councillor Akhtar's suggestion, I find community committees are a really good place to bring that community experience in terms of cooperative members, and they have the ability to do that. So I'm content with what we're proposing here.
And I think as well something that's already come. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hills, go for it.
I basically just wanted to say a very similar thing, because it's a really broad remit. I think co-opting individuals from the community, while that's a really good idea to invite them so they can have that, like you say, the assets to the community, sort of bringing in the community voice, that's really helpful. But then when it's such a broad remit, co-opting a member for an extended period of time, especially permanently, I think that then might cause problems in the future in terms of having other people have access to the board. So yeah, happy with the approach that we're going to take on this one.
But yeah, certainly I think based on some of the conversations so far prior to the meeting, I think having experts, either kind of experts with experience within our communities or experts within a given field, is something that I certainly want to put at the heart of our decision making. Anything to add, Becky? Or?
No, only that I would agree with the comments from Councillor Haigh and Councillor Hills that in terms of this remit, there is quite a lot of diversity there, and I think identifying someone who has expertise in all of those areas provide a bit of a challenge.
Right, so thank you. Moving on then to the main item for today, and thank you again to all our officers who we're going to hear from shortly. So this is the performance monitoring report. This provides a summary of performance against priorities relevant to this scrutiny board. As part of our responsibilities as this board, under the budget and policy framework, we will receive this performance data twice a year. It provides an opportunity to offer challenge and consider whether there are areas we want to examine in more detail in the future, and also celebrate where the council is performing well and improving the lives of residents. So this report, as in the pack, sets out how the services that come under our remit are contributing towards our delivery. This time we'll also provide an opportunity, a summary of the development of the Directorate's wider outcomes and impact framework. I draw your attention to page 32, which sets out the three questions that the outcomes and impact framework is built around. I'd ask members to bear these questions in mind as we ask our own questions and feedback, and as we comment on the information before us. It would be helpful at the end of this debate if we can reach a view as to whether we as a board endorse the direction of travel as outlined in the documents and are happy with the right information is being captured in that framework. Are there other KPIs, other key performance indicators that we think may need to be included in the framework? Members have a separate note setting out the order in which we'll take the performance items, including page references and lead officers. So I'm now going to invite the different officers to take it in turns to present and I suppose build on what is in the written pack. We'll ask the lead officer in each case to provide a brief introduction before opening to member questions. If we feel we need to examine any of these areas in more detail over the course of the year, please do speak up, and then we can, as we go through the report, we can consider including them in the work programme, which is the final item for today. Can I also ask officers to bear in mind that we have a number of newly elected members on this scrutiny board and a number of members who've not previously been on this scrutiny board. And so please, obviously you can assume we've read the papers, but please avoid acronyms and things that might seem very, very obvious to you but might not be obvious to all of us. So I think content-wise, I'm going to in a minute I'm going to go to Lisa, who I think needs to speak first, but are we going to Dr. Adamosu first? Yes. But yeah, if Dr. Adamosu and Ian Strickland would like to begin with the general introductory comments before we begin, that would be great.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Chair. So just by way of introduction, my name is Temitope Adamosu. I'm the Director of Communities, Environment, Housing and Health, which some of the services here form. And I guess just by way of brief introduction was just to provide a bit of context for the direction of travel for the Directorate. The different services that we've got within the Directorate, we have spoken about it being more than just a collection of services. These are the services that really are the determinants of health inequality and well-being for our residents. So this has really driven the direction of travel for us, where we are definitely, when it comes to performance, we are looking about how efficient the services are working, but we're also looking at the important points that the Chair just mentioned around resident impact, around the visibility in the neighbourhood as well. So those are the lenses that have really driven the way that we have set out the performance. But also just to say that the services that you've got here are more than just the services. So it's housing, making sure that you've got that safe access to quality housing, but it's also looking at you've got that access to parks and green spaces, but also that you have those clean streets neighbourhoods, which we know all three of those services really do impact health inequalities that we mentioned earlier. So again, that's the lens that we've looked in this, and we absolutely want to make sure that our services are working efficiently, but we also need to also ask that question of what is the impact for residents and are we improving communities going forward. And it's within that lens that we have driven the performance report. I will hand over to Ian if he's got anything, and then we'll go over to Lisa.
Thank you. My name's Ian Strickland. I work in business development, so I've been responsible for putting the report together for today's meeting. So performance management across the Directorate comes under my team's remit, and we work closely with services on information, data, making sure that it's accurate, timely, etc., so that we can provide quality performance management information both citywide and at a locality level as well. So lots of work going on through the outcomes and impacts framework, which we'll hope to feed into this process in the future. Thank you.
Many thanks. I also wondered if the executive members at this point wanted to comment, because you might not obviously have an opportunity to do so before. If you don't, that's fine. And or introduce yourself.
I'm Councillor James Gibson, and I'm the Executive Member for Environment, so covering half of this portfolio. Don't want to say anything. I don't really want to preempt what my colleagues are going to say. I think perhaps actually let the officers give the report, and then at the end I'm happy to sort of summarise and pull out some of the bits from the report that I think need highlighting, and also answer any questions as well. Probably the best way to do it, Chair. What do you think?
Very happy to go with that. Councillor Khan, do you at least want to introduce yourself and then perhaps follow suit?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Asghar Khan, the newly exec member for housing, and as you know, in front of you, you've got some, excellent report, and the office is going to go in details on housing, and as Councillor James Gibson says, I will be happy to pick up at the end as well, Chair, if anything is adding up.
Great. So you two keep your powder dry, and we'll come back to you in due course. Do members have any questions? Brilliant, you do. Just before we plunge into the details, so I'll start with you, Councillor Firth.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome to the new exec members for this board and all the officers that have joined us this morning. One of the starkest figures I found was in Appendix 1 of the report in relation to meeting the Decent Homes Standard. Currently, the target is 1%, and unfortunately we're at 5.62%. Which obviously means that around about 3,000 homes don't meet the standard. Could you just give us a bit more meat on the bone in terms of where it stands, what we're actually doing to improve that, and how it compares to previous years? Because there isn't that information. Thank you.
If it's all right, Councillor Firth, what I'm going to do is, at this point, I'm keen if members have questions about the general outlook, the general introduction as presented. We're then going to go into the details, and so, for example, Adam Crampton is in due course going to speak to his particular element, and at that point would appreciate full scrutiny and interrogation. Okay. So, but if this is more the opportunity. So again, also if you can keep your powder dry, but if there's any particular questions about the general approach as outlined, if not, we can dive into the details.
Thank you, Chair. And it is about the general approach that Temtopia outlined. Obviously, you spoke about the quantitative approach that Ian puts into the report, the figures that we can all look at, but you talked more about the experience of living as a resident in Leeds, and this qualitative approach to data is, I think, a really interesting one, but much more difficult to measure. So what are you proposing in terms of how we understand people's experience of living in different parts of the city and the impact that has on their lives?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great point. The journey that we're going on as a directorate absolutely is one that values both quantitative and qualitative. And one of the operating models that we've got is the localities approach, which I'm sure at some point we'll come to this scrutiny and talk about. But that approach allows us to gain information from ward councillors, from residents, from businesses, all within place to really understand what's happening at place and to ensure that our interventions that we have or the services that we're delivering really do attend to need. So it is a journey that we're going on, and we absolutely plan to make sure that we have residents' voice, councillors' voice really informing the way that we're working as a service, as we know we can get a lot from the quantitative feedback, but that qualitative will give us a much richer picture and allow us to triangulate all of that to really ensure that we are performing the way that we are and addressing to needs. So we are on a journey to that, and we are developing that, and I'm sure at another time we could bring to you exactly the mechanisms that we're doing that with.
Yeah, I completely understand that is a journey that we all need to go on. I think what we do really need to understand, perhaps as a scrutiny board, though, is how do we measure that it has made a difference that we have done these interventions, and that perhaps is a conversation for another time, but I think it is a really important one to have.
Thank you both. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I do welcome this place-based view of performance. I think what's happening qualitatively, hard word that one, is really important to us because it's what our residents attain to us. So we can have as many statistics as we want, but that's only from a certain number of people who've filled in a survey. Whereas, I mean, I'm taking part in a listening exercise at the moment, and the feedback that's coming back to me is really interesting. It's not something that gets picked up generally. So I think how we interact with our residents and get their feedback about where they live and what's bothering them rather than what's bothering us, or bothering some national measure somewhere because we've been asked to ask it, is a really important way forward, and I think it's going to make things better everywhere, hopefully.
Councillor.
I can't completely agree with Councillor Haig and Councillor Chapman. Was it your question, Councillor Haig, around the sort of the metric around how we analyse the sort of qualitative analysis of data, or was it more about who were we going to consult with?
I think, thank you, Councillor Gibson. I think more the former. It's how do we measure the change in people's experience of where they live, and if we are making these improvements, how that feel, and I think that is quite intangible, but also it is actually the thing that makes the most difference. If people feel they live in somewhere that's cared about, they will care for it too, and if they feel that it's not cared for, and there's certainly, I could point to places in my own ward where that has been the case, how we do that and how we work with under interventions. Obviously, pride in place is going to be a really important factor in significant parts of the city. How do we learn from that? How do we integrate that with the work we're doing?
Councillor Axel. Oh, apologies.
Sorry,
Hold on.
Just to jump in, and thank you very much for the clarification. And as part of when we come back to talk about the localities, we are working with academic partners to do exactly that. There are metrics that help us to understand the lived experience for residents, and we are pulling on those. We want to do some baseline work to understand where residents are now, and then we're able to look at the impact going forward. But we're absolutely working alongside with academic partners to help us to support that. So personally, I find qualitative impact just as important as quantitative, and we can absolutely bring the measures that bring that.
Councillor, yes.
it might be useful at some point, perhaps, for some of us to hear from those academic partners as to their work. I think that would be really interesting.
Perfect, yes. Yeah. Yes, Councillor Akhtar. Councillor Hills.
Yeah, I just had a broad point to add about this localities-based approach. I think it's really important to do it like this in this place-based way. And I know you've said that there'll be like more detail coming at some point with the actual strategy itself and how it's going to be implemented. But if we are going to do this, could I just ask that it gets done on like sort of lower than a ward-based level? Because obviously a lot of our wards, and Little London Woodhouse, I don't know whether there's more around the table as well, are extremely diverse. Like there's the city centre, but there's also communities alongside it that are deeply deprived. And I wouldn't want to see a localities-based approach where if it's done on the ward level, you get like a one voice for that ward. So if it could just be sort of like more like geographically spread across the ward, that would be really good. That'd be great.
Councillor Firth, did you?
Thank you, Chair. Actually relevant to what we were discussing, further to what was Councillor Hills was saying, I actually have another point, which was the fact that I think that's a good idea of bringing up placed area data, given the fact that's what we're emphasising, and also, more importantly, to ensure that we can actually see what's going on. But I think the big thing that's been helpful from a number of us in the past is seeing how it's reflected over time.
Thank you all so far. I think just one thing I'd want to pick out of the conversation so far, and this came up in some of the meetings, some of the discussions I had with officers leading up to this meeting, was just about recognising the deep significance of things like perception and imagination and the way people feel about their community. It's echoing what others have said, and that in turn has a huge driver, more than perhaps in itself the kind of the numbers and the data. So if people feel good about their community, if they feel the council has their back, if they feel like their communities are being invested in, then they themselves are, as citizens, more likely to play an active role in their communities and so on. I just did have a point of clarity though about the just off the back of the questions that you two are asking was so is it today or in the future that we're going to get more details about our kind of partnership with the academic partners and that work?
Did you ask, is it today or in the future? I mean, we are speaking with them right now, so we absolutely can come back to you at some point in the future outlining the work that we're doing with them and how we plan to progress. But in terms of any intervention that we do with the localities, we absolutely want to make sure we've got a baseline understanding, so we're starting off with them right now.
But that would certainly be something, because if this is fundamentally underpinning kind of everything we're talking about, it needs to be a kind of major feature of the works programme this year. All good for now, before we start to plunge into some of the details? Great. We are just going to reconfigure the programme a little bit. So, sorry, housing is just going to have to hold on a bit, and we're just going to go straight ahead to Lisa and Co for bins and recycling. So, over to you, and yeah.
Thank you, Chair. By way of introduction, my name is Lisa Culver. I'm the Deputy Chief Officer of Environmental Services. I'm not going to go into too much of the data right now, but I'm really keen to show a little bit of the story that sits behind it. The data tells us, when we are looking at it, that as a whole, Leeds is becoming increasingly a more responsible city by the way we manage our waste, our environmental resources, but also how we partner with our communities. It's important, especially for new members, to reflect that we are one of the largest local authorities in the council. We serve over 800,000 residents, and we collect around 25.5 million bins each year. Against that scale, the service continues to perform exceptionally well, achieving a collection rate of 99.83%. The good news for us is residents are making a difference. Households continue to reduce their waste and recycling significantly more. Although the data in the report shows the headline recycling data has reduced. This is actually because we had a 20% reduction in garden waste last year due to the very hot summer. The data does show us the positive impact we have when we're working with our communities, and in particular in partnership with environmental services. We see that we get better recycling behaviours, we see that we have less waste created at source, and we have greater participation in council services. And this all contributes to cleaner neighbourhoods, improved environmental outcomes for our communities. We have two ways to manage non-recyclable waste, and the data tells us that we are actually getting better at it. Through our recycling and energy recovery facility and the Leeds Pipes network, black bin waste is helping us to provide energy to more than 4,000 homes and some civic buildings, and we save around 6,500 tonnes of carbon emissions annually. What was once considered for us waste is now being used as a valuable resource. One of the strongest indicators of progress is landfill. Historically, much of the waste collected nationally used to be buried. Today in Leeds, only 0.09% of household waste goes to landfill. In practical terms for us, this means that virtually all waste collection across the city is either recycled, reused, or generates energy. This is an achievement we, as residents, members and staff, can all be very proud of. However, we do recognise we have opportunities for improvement. Data highlights where these are and where our focus needs to be moving forward. With regard to curbside bin collection, whilst collection performance does remain strong, every bin that is missed matters to our residents, and it matters to us too. We will continue to build a high-performing and robust service, working with residents, highway colleagues and utility companies to improve access, manage roadworks proactively and minimise disruption wherever possible. The second area we know we need to improve and focus on moving forward, and we are doing lots of work within this space over the coming months, is fly tipping and environmental crime. Fly tipping and environmental crime remain a significant challenge for our city. Over 14,000 incidents were reported during the year. And whilst enforcement activity is increasing and we are becoming more intelligence-led, there is still more to do. Our ambition is not simply to just issue more enforcement notices, but to address the root cause, improving neighbourhoods and strengthening community pride. In summary for this data performance report, the story is a positive one for environmental services in our city. Leeds is generating less waste, recycling more of the right materials, making productive use of waste that cannot be recycled, and sending virtually nothing to landfill. The opportunity now is to build on those strong relationships, work alongside our communities to create safer, cleaner neighbourhoods, have stronger civic pride, and have an even more sustainable service and a city for our future. Thank you, Chair. We're happy to take any questions.
Many thanks. So I wonder if members might well have things to say about bins. It's one of our favourite topics. So Councillor Parnham got in there first.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you to Ian for the performance management report. Just a couple of quick things. First of all, can I say thank you so much to the dedicated waste management team that answer councillors' enquiries. They always get back to me straight away and clear up any missed bins, so a big thanks to that team. Secondly, just the way the report here is outlined, laid out for us. Page 43 in our pack. As I said in the pre-meeting, I'm new to this board. I'm used to scrutiny and resources, which is quite heavy on data, and I appreciate there's a level of data which is too much for scrutiny board members, perhaps. But I'd like a bit of comparison, please. You know, between wards and how wards are doing. How many fly tipping issues are reported? Because, for example, in Armley, I seem to be on the email every day. So, if we could just have a bit of comparison, please. That'd be ideal. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we'll take that forward.
Great, that was easy. Councillor Akhtar.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to listen to your presentation, especially with regards to recycling, which is a top priority for all of us. Just to, I mean, you mentioned on page 42, 43 about the enforcement. Now, can I ask how many people or what measures have you taken, especially, and something that we have been talking about this in Headingley, Hyde Park, Little London, Woodhouse area, where bins are kept on the street rather than responsible households should take them back into the bin yard, and what enforcement has taken place, and also how many people have been issued with any fixed penalties across the city, if this is the case, with regards to the flying tipping.
Morning everybody, my name's Amy Dickinson and I'm the Service Manager for Environmental Enforcement. So bins on streets, it is something that we can deal with. What the legislation that we do use is Section 46 under the Environmental Protection Act. However, that was decriminalised some years ago. So in some areas of the city we do have the PSPO, which is what we use for bins left on streets. In other areas we do a lot of education. We've got some of the street wardens that visit and speak to residents about bins being on the streets. It is something that we can deal with. In terms of numbers, we'd have to look into that and get that back to you.
Yeah, please do.
Now, there is a PSPO in our neck of the wood, but can I ask, I mean, you don't have to answer at this board, could you please let us know how many enforcement actions has been taken place in Hyde Park area, which affects both wards, Headingley, Hyde Park and Little London, where the street have been covered with the bins for the last many years, and we have been raising this for some time. And how many enforcement officers have you got in place for this particular area? As we all know, this part of the city is heavily populated by HMOs and the student population, and what measures can we take to educate the, I mean, we recently had a meeting with the landlord association. They're willing to work with us. How can we work closely with the landlords and also our team to make sure the bins are not part of the street furniture? Those bins needs to be taken back into the bin yard, please. Could you please write to us? I mean, you don't have to answer, but it's something that I'll be delighted to work with yourself and the partners to make sure our streets have been kept cleaned.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll take that forward too.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Gibson, I'll come back to you, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thanks for your questions, councillors, about fly tipping and enforcement. I mean, as you know, I'm pretty new to the role, but I think, you know, that as the report highlighted, and my experience actually as a ward councillor, is the fly tipping team are really great. You know, we are. You know, the minute that I report something, you know, within a couple of days, fly tipping is often removed. Unfortunately, that means we've sometimes been our own success has somewhat been our downfall, because people are fly tipping in particular places. It gets moved so quickly that people see that as an unofficial tipping point. So, and that leads on to, and of course, I'd rather have it that way. The team is so good that they're picking up things so quickly, and it is a positive story. But there is something around enforcement. I met with the team, both teams. There's two enforcement teams actually. Last week, there is a lot of enforcement activity taking place across the city, but I think where we do fall down, and something that we need to improve on, is communication about that, for two reasons. The first reason is that, you know, there's a positive story to be able to reassure communities and your residents and you as local councillors, and secondly as well, it also serves to put people off from fly tipping, because if they see that enforcement activities being taken place, and fly tipping and leaving bins out as well, it will make people think again. So one of the things that we're working on is improving our communications around that as well. But obviously getting those numbers to you, Councillor Akhtar, is going to be an important part of that as well. Councillor Parham.
So, Thank you very much. There's lots of you, plenty to say, but it's Councillor Thompson next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Just, to say that in general, the refuse collection service is absolutely incredible, and that people only notice when it goes wrong, and they think it's the only thing that their council tax pays for. I'm sure we're not alone. Ongoing issues of collections that are not reported as missed at end of day. Often we only hear several days later from residents, and they seem particularly difficult to tackle. Usually when it's not the standard crew, someone's ill, someone's on holiday, but they maybe haven't got the in-cab technology working or they're not using it. It would be interesting to know what's being done to try and resolve that. That's something that's flared up recently for us, but I'm sure isn't isolated. And then wonder what we're doing around behaviour change around fly tipping and litter. As a ward with a mix of council estates, sort of private residential areas and extensive rural areas where fly tipping is a real blight. How do we challenge that behaviour? How, as well as enforcing it, what are we doing? What are we learning about that? I hope that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll do the first bit and then I'll hand over to Amy. With regards our crews, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say. They do a wonderful job and they work very hard. We are doing some focus work at the moment with our crews on performance and culture. So we will start to see that with the in-cab system being rolled out with much more robustness than we have done previously. So I'm hoping that we will see, confident we'll see a great change. So thank you very much.
Yep, so in terms of behaviour change and working with residents and local communities, so we're looking at the introduction of the waste crime team, which will mainly focus on things such as fly tipping, littering, domestic waste issues, and we're wanting to strengthen relationships with communities. So we're looking at engagement and education, so helping residents understand their responsibilities around duty of care and correct disposal routes. And encourages the shared responsibility and to help residents understand their role basically in keeping Leeds clean. And we'll be doing that by, the way that we work at the moment is the officers are more reactive, but we want to be more proactive. So we'll be looking at more intense working in certain areas, enforcement officers and educational visits with residents and businesses.
Okay, many thanks. Moving on, Councillor Firth.
Thank you very much. And further to what Councillor Thompson said, I think the one thing we can say, yes, absolutely. It's a job that many people would not want to be doing, and therefore they're doing it in all weathers and all times of year, and it is a damn difficult job. The only issue that we have, particularly in our patch, is the fact that we feel, or a lot of my residents feel, it's a postcode lottery because of a very key example. When we talk about if a vehicle is full up, a lorry is full up of rubbish, we have at least one less vehicle a day that can come and replace that vehicle than other parts of the city. And that's particularly the case for those that are in the northern areas of the area because we're further away from Cross Green and the Rove. Can I ask, in terms of the particular mention there about the 99% collection rate, despite what we're talking about here, the fact is that anecdotally, and with the issues that we're dealing with on the ground, is that a lot of those reports are not coming through in addition to the end of day report. And sometimes, unfortunately, that does include entire villages. For example, Scholes and Barwick just a few weeks ago. Just wanted to ask what's happening in terms of once those reports are prepared and before they're submitted, what work is done to actually make sure that there isn't anything that is missing, because unfortunately far too often there are being big chunks that are sadly being left out and rather being left to the crews to report them rather than actually what's going on the ground, especially given the development of AI and technology as we see it.
Thank you. I'm Philip Turpin. I manage the performance and data within environmental services. As you've pointed out, the missed bins report that we use is based on customer complaints about missed bins, service requests, and that's the national standard for reporting missed bins, and it makes it comparable with other local authorities and also our historic data. unfortunately, the end of day reports can't feature all of the missed bins that come in through the customer system, because they tend to come 2-3 days later after the missed bin, because we've got a policy that if you've got a missed bin, if you leave it out for 48 hours, we will attempt to come and collect it. So it would be delayed, the information, and that's why we've got kind of two sets of information, the ones you get on the day and the ones that we report to boards like this.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification. I think the one thing we can say here is that the reputation of the department is good because of the nature of the fact that they provide a really honest response to whenever we do report things. I think it's just trying to avoid that work in between with actually trying to find a way of getting around that, because it could certainly be something that really helps in the future, rather than always having to go back and check where the vehicle went, because unfortunately too far often we're having residents saying they want to go online and report something as missed, but unfortunately because the vehicle went past them on their street, it therefore means they can't actually report it, or even that the vehicle's been deemed to have gone that way. Could I ask on a separate point in relation to recycling citywide? We've got a report coming later on in the year in relation to recycling, but could that actually reflect what's happening across the whole of the city? I know that in the past it's been done ward by ward, and it's quite difficult to break it down even further without having to create a really monstrous jigsaw puzzle, but ultimately it would be really helpful to see how that's going, because I think it's always about then we have the issue about helping people, not educating them, but helping people to understand what they can then recycle and improve things in areas where it's really struggling. I appreciate that was a comment, and I want to go on to waste crime. Congratulations to the waste crime team on their creation. I'm still trying to figure out what the difference is between the waste crime team and the serious environmental crime team. The serious environmental crime team was a real innovation that really helped to crack down on the issues that we've had, and all I wanted to ask is if we could have on the public record what the real differences are between those and how we're going to be able to measure the difference between the two teams that take place under your strong leadership, Amy, and also, more importantly, could we have a real emphasis on, given that this is a really big topic that raised regularly, that Councillor Gibson raised himself, can we champion the success stories that we have more as a council? And is there anything you want to add to that in terms of recent activity that's been taking place? Because I know there's been some in our ward. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of the recycling data, as you pointed out, it's very difficult to break that down to ward level because the refuse routes don't operate in individual wards, but we do quite often break down and present to Scrutiny a breakdown of material types, household waste site recycling, all the different citywide services, the recycling we get from them, and that can be put together and brought back for a future date.
Okay, thank you. I'll just start off with Councillor Firth, the differences between the serious environmental crime team and the waste crime team. So the serious environmental crime team was something that was set up back in around about October 2021, and it's a small team that we've got within service, and they basically deal with serious and organised waste crime. So they'll deal with things like illegal waste carriers, associated vehicles including scrap vans, commercial industrial fly tipping, targeted enforcement around fly tipping hotspots. They'll deal with travellers, landlords, letting agents, and businesses that produce significant amounts of waste. And then the other side is what will be the waste crime team. So at the moment we've got a number of officers that deal with everything else. So it's your low level fly tipping, so your mattresses, your fridges, your domestic waste issues in the streets. But at the moment the officers, the rest of the officers that we've got deal with everything. So that involves some commercial waste, domestic waste, but we've got things like environmental health issues and highways enforcement that they also do. So what we're looking at doing moving forward is separating that out so that we have officers that just deal with those environmental health issues and highways, and the rest of the team will be reprioritised so that they focus on just waste crime within local areas.
Really quick, yeah.
Thank you for that, and thank you for giving a bit more meat on the bone. One final question from me, which is in the report it says there was 14,065 incidents of fly tipping and enforcement actions. Can you explain a bit more meat on the bone why there was significantly more enforcement action compared to the incidents? I appreciate it's quite a basic question.
Yep, so the number of incidents is the number of reports that have been made by the public. The actions is everything that we do for that, so it might be that for one report that we've had, we might go out and clear it, we might send a letter, we might issue a fixed penalty notice, we might issue a legal notice, it might be prosecution. So what we would expect is that those actions are a lot higher than incidents. We still think that there should be even more actions, so we are working on that. And the data that we've got is only as good as what we put into the system, so we are doing a lot of work around the data as well.
Many thanks. Great. Councillor Hills was next.
Yes, hi. First of all, as everyone has already said, thank you to the refuse team. You're always really responsive, and it's super helpful, especially like on the individual level with people. It's great. I had a couple of questions. In the report, it says obviously it's a real big achievement that we're not sending virtually any refuse at all to landfill anymore. That's a huge achievement. But we are burning 64% of it to power the Leeds pipe system. It does mention that it's low carbon, but I was wondering how low carbon and whether that could be included in the report that comes later this year, the Simpler Recycling Part 2 in the work orders. My second question was about the Leeds pipe system. I'm sensing a kind of tension between obviously we're burning 64% of the refuse, and that's then contributing to the powering of the Leeds pipe system. Whether, obviously in future we're trying to recycle more of that, whether there's going to be an issue in ensuring that the Leeds pipe system continues to power those buildings and this district heating provided. And then the last question was just about additional data in the report, which I think is becoming a bit of a theme. On the fly tipping incidents and enforcement actions, I was wondering whether the actions could be sectioned off to explain exactly what those actions are. I know you've just mentioned that some of them are the clearing, some of them are like issuing fines and issuing warnings. Just if those could be like separated out so that we're aware and we can then scrutinise that a little bit more, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Polly, if you want to respond now about the Leeds pipes, do, or alternatively hold off until your section later.
I can do it now if that's okay. So in terms of Leeds pipes, there's a fairly complex calculation about the carbon footprint of that heat versus gas versus renewable heat. So it's probably best that I share that out of here, so I don't have the specific figure to mind, but it is significantly lower carbon, which is why businesses and public sector around the city are signing up to it, because it meets all the requirements. In terms of that tension, the energy from waste plant, when it was first built, was always modelled on declining waste, and it was always modelled on the fact that more and more would go to recycling, so that there isn't that tension. But the other benefit of the Leeds Pipes network is fundamentally the infrastructure is that there are pipes under the city, and actually what can be connected to that can change over time. So, for example, we're exploring other sort of heat networks. They could be connected to sort of water source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps. You're not tied to it being the energy from waste forever and a day. And that's the beauty of it, that it's flexible of how that's provided. So that's kind of longer term, but there isn't this kind of we must burn in order for it to keep going. I don't think it's an immediate problem in terms of what we can recycle and can't recycle, but that has all been built into the thinking.
Thank you. And any other responses to those queries?
Thank you. It's just to point out that the energy from waste facility obviously does feed the district heating scheme, but the majority of the energy is fed into the national grid. So as well as the carbon benefit that we get from the district heating network, we power around 22,000 houses a year with the electricity that's created at the incinerator. And in terms of what you mentioned about declining waste, because I manage the RERF contract as part of my job as well, and the contract is set up that it will always be the aim will always be to keep the facility full, and that is done by commercial waste, so it will always be replaced, and as Polly said, it was modelled to be replaced by commercial waste from Leeds, and that would continue to produce enough electricity and heat to continue doing what it's doing today.
Oh, hang on. Did you want to come in as well? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just in terms of the actions taken. Yeah, we can have a look at that.
Thank you, and over you, Councillor Barker.
Yeah, regarding fly tipping, the only little advertisement I've seen saying residents don't let people use your, bad tippers, is about a screen about that little big on a roundabout. Could we have a large campaign where we're actually telling people that if you allow people to come and take stuff away from your residency, you are going to get large fines? Because the one that I've seen is hardly says anything to a little picture of a little truck, a big, which just nobody's going to know that
Yeah, that's something that we do at the moment. We do work closely with Keep Britain Tidy on fly tipping campaigns, and we have a communications team who we work with to do that. But yeah, I agree, it does need to be more out there and visible for residents to see.
I mean, all through the city we have big posters that's like 20 foot wide, and we don't need many of them, but in certain places it might be worth spending like a couple of £1,000 to put a big campaign out there and saying don't use illegal fly tippers, and if you're getting people to come into your gardens and clean garden rubbish, who is doing it, and you're going to get fined if you all get caught.
Yeah, I totally agree. We do have something called the Leeds Accredited Waste Carriers Service, and that online is a list of all our accredited legalised waste carriers that Leeds residents can go onto the website and have a look who they can use to take waste away. But yeah, it's something we'll take on board about advertising.
Many thanks. Councillor Chapman's been waiting very patiently.
Yeah, I've got more things now. The first point I was going to actually make is the metric that we use to measure the missed bin performance. And I know we've talked about this, so I don't want to go on about it. But from this, it's saying if more of our residents reported it, then our performance would go down. So instead of one person on the street reporting it, if 10 people reported it, would the performance go down? I think that's what this is saying. It's on page 40.
Thank you.
So,
yes, the more reports we get, that they will fall into the statistics. Even if somebody reports it missed several times over several days. If 10 people on the street report, I mean, some people report that the neighbour's bin's been missed, and all of them will feature in the statistics and always have done. The other thing to point out is that because we've got the 48-hour recovery period, even if it's been recovered within the 48 hours and therefore is no longer classed as missed bin, it still will feature in these metrics.
I think our residents consider it a missed bin if it's not done on the day. I mean, the recovery is great, and it does happen more often than not, but I don't think residents appreciate that difference. So should we be encouraging our residents to report the bins more often? Because I'm not sure. I do get people, obviously, that come to me and tell me the bins have been missed. I see it on Facebook all the time, but I'm not sure how many people from my ward are actually reporting bins. Do we have that data? Can we have a look at it? Because I'm sure my residents would probably report more if they thought it meant that there would be an improvement on what is already a good service, but is perhaps being overstated because we're not getting as many reports through. That's what I'm getting at. Is these stats are great, but how accurate they actually are if the base data is the number of residents that can actually be bothered to go online and report it.
I mean, yes, that is correct. It is down to the number of reports, and yes, you should ensure that residents report missed bins, because in some cases we are unaware of them. And yes, in terms of ward-based data, we can provide ward-based missed bins.
Yeah, sorry, it's not the ward-based data missed bins is fine, but the number of reports per missed bin incident would be quite useful. Maybe, I know that's probably quite detailed and it's not something we want to do all the time, but just as a separate piece of work, it would be really interesting for me to know how many people on a bin route actually reported it being missing, and therefore how big a problem people were deeming it to be, or if we're seriously understating these stats. You know, because one person, you can have one person on the street report it, and that's fine. It's one person. If 50 report it, that makes a hell of a difference to the stat, doesn't it? And the impact on people.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's something we can look into and get back to you.
I'm conscious we need to move on to the next section, but Councillor Chapman, did you have more, or was that? I mean, I'm sure you've got more, but.
Are we doing city pipes later?
Councillor Firth, if this is really quick, then yes.
Could I just make one suggestion further to Councillor Barker's excellent point about advertising about illegal carriers, which is that we actually could use our own fleet of lorries that we have from the bin wagons that have various advertisements on that, and therefore could cut down the cost by having them on our own vehicles.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. I'm sure we can look into that. Many thanks. Thanks to all members. Thanks. Please, of course, I think you've heard it several times, but please pass our thanks on behalf of the council to all the great people doing this work at the coalface. We are going to be seeing you again next month for Scrutiny Board, so we'll have opportunity to dive more into this. I did just want to highlight a couple of members have raised it, but something for us to not talk about now, but something to talk about is this kind of 99% statistic, and we discussed it in the pre-briefing as well, which when I looked at it I was like, wow, that is brilliant, we are nailing it. And then actually when you pick apart it's this national statistic that is actually not quite as good as it seems. And I suppose it'd be interesting for us to think about how in the perhaps medium to long term we could maybe work with other local authorities to try to work out a more meaningful metric, especially in the era of AI. And could there be better ways to have a more complex and nuanced approach, which would be 97% collected as they should have been, and then actually another 0.5% collected within 48 hours, whatever. But it'd be interesting to think about how we could move towards that in the coming years. I think this again more for discussion next time, but again it'd be really interesting, even if we can't break it down to ward based, like what's the real strategy for trying to drive up recycling in particular communities where we're particularly struggling for that. I think as well, it kind of came up, but I'd want to echo it. We've talked about comparisons with other comparable local authorities like the other core cities. Like ever so often I hear rumours that there is another city not too far away from here, from the other side of the Pennines, who is doing a huge amount of enforcement action, successful enforcement action on fly tipping. It'd be just good to be able to know if that is really the case. And again, to be able to compare ourselves with them would be really, really key. So there's much more to talk about next month, I'm sure. But many thanks once again. And if you do need to go, please do, and we will move on in the agenda. Great. So thanks again. Moving on to housing, please, Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Adam Crampton, Chief Officer for Housing. With your permission, Chair, I'll just summarise the report and then I'll circle back round to Councillor Firth's earlier question and pick that up first. Is that okay? Thank you. So we start the housing element in relation to demand for temporary accommodation and the incredible prevention work that we do around preventing homelessness.
You'll note the numbers are significantly high of people in temporary accommodation. Over the last 2 years, we've seen around about a 250% increase in families, in particular in temporary accommodation. A real pressure, obviously, on the service, and a huge amount of very vulnerable people that require that support. So we talk about our prevention programmes, an awful lot of activity taking place around prevention. We have our targets set, obviously, for next year, but that early intervention is really crucial to us to provide that support. Providing support for people before we get to that crisis point is something that we are really keen to do more of and build on our existing successes. The second part of the housing element really focuses on our social housing. We've got obviously some information there around void properties, around the decent homes that I'll come back to. The percentage of homes rated as an EPCC from an energy performance perspective. We then have details of our tenant satisfaction measures, which are measures that we report on, all providers of social housing report on an annual basis. That includes both the perception of our tenants and some sort of objective building safety performance measures. Some really positive trends within those tenant satisfaction measures, and in Appendix 1B we break that down for the last 3 years, so you can see those trends over the 3 years that these performance measures have been recorded. We talk about our rent collection, and again, positive outcomes on rent collection, exceeding our 96% target for last year. And then Appendix 1A, I would bring to Board's attention, is the outcome of our inspection by the regulator of social housing that took place between sort of October and March of this year. We received a C2 grading. The gradings go from C1 down to C4, so we received the second highest C2 grading, which is a positive outcome for us in the context of our expectation to be a C1 organisation. There were 2 areas of weakness identified by the regulator of social housing. They were around the quality of our data on some of our homes, the condition of some of our homes, and around electrical compliance. So around about 91% of our homes have an in-date electrical safety inspection. Obviously, we need to increase that number towards 100%. Both those areas of weakness are areas that we presented transparently to the regulator. They were not uncovered as part of the inspection. They were shared as part of our ongoing engagement and self-assessment. We are quite self-aware. We like to think we're self-aware, has been confirmed by the inspection. So we have detailed improvement plans in place around those 2 areas that we're currently on track to deliver to, and we're hoping to be in a position to seek re-inspection to hopefully achieve a C1 grading, where we expect to be early in 2027. If I may just circle back then to Councillor Firth's question on decent homes. Councillor, thank you for your question, and you're absolutely right that it's higher than it should be. I will. One of the reasons I was keen to summarise one of the weaknesses on the quality of data on the condition of our homes. It's very much linked to our decency reporting. I'll try not to go down this rabbit hole too deeply, Chair, but important just to set some context of how our asset management system works. So we undertake a 5-year stock condition survey. That's one of the areas that we need to improve upon, as identified under the inspection, and it's that data that's used to calculate decency. In the absence of trusted data from that inspection, the system extrapolates data on what we currently have, and that does kind of tend to paint a slightly more negative picture than with that trusted data. You asked about historical trends, Councillor. In March 2025, we were just under 4% non-decent homes. On the 1st of April 2025, that went up to 11% because of the way that extrapolated data works. So as we are improving on those weaknesses, delivering those improvement actions as identified throughout the inspection, we are seeing the percentage of trusted data increase significantly, and as a result, the reported non-decency decrease accordingly. Obviously, we do have some genuinely non-decent homes. That tends to, the most significant proportion of which is around external wall finishings and roof coverings. So where we do have homes that are failing to meet the decent home standard, they are all on planned programmes for that work to be completed over the next 12 months.
Councillor Firth, did you have a follow-up?
Thank you very much, Adam, and thank you, Chair. That was a really comprehensive reply, and I really appreciate that, and also really appreciate you providing the historic data, which I think is really helpful in any report to show the work that you've been doing, or not, but in this case, it's absolutely clear the work that you guys are trying to do to try and crack on with those particular issues. Given that one of the particular criticisms was that we lack a detailed understanding of the condition of the homes owned and managed by the council, given that we only do a 5-year stock condition survey, is there something the council's doing to try and improve that situation, or what is it that the regulator wants to meet that standard?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Ultimately, the expectation is that 100% of our homes will have received the stock condition survey in that rolling 5-year cycle. 2 years ago, around about 40% of our homes had a survey in the last 5 years. We have an internal stock condition team, so we have an internal team with the capacity to deliver 20% of our homes on an annual basis, so that 5-year rolling cycle. Around about 12 months ago, we procured an external provider basically to support us on that catch-up exercise. So our plan is to utilise both our internal and the external delivery to reach as close as we can to 100%, and 100% will be very, very difficult. Obviously, it's incumbent on access to the property. But as close as we can to that 100%, we anticipate that we'll be there, like I say, around about late 2026, early 2027, and we then have the capacity to maintain that position with our internal resource. So that was something, like I say, that we identified a couple of years ago. We've put those plans in place prior to our inspection by the regulator of social housing, and ultimately the regulator has validated that approach, and on the basis that we deliver as we currently are delivering, that will meet the regulator's expectations.
Really quick, Councillor Fair.
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate that, Adam. The 40% figure is staggering, given that we obviously need to be up to 100%. Can you reflect on any historic data we have on that, maybe even pre-COVID briefly, and also, more importantly, what sort of progress we're making currently to get it as close up to 100, because that is far off the mark, as I'm sure you'll appreciate.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Just to absolutely clarify, that was around about 2 years ago. We were at 40%. The key reason for which is during 2020 and 2021, obviously during the COVID years, stock condition surveys was not deemed to be an essential activity. So effectively, we lost 2 years. That was compounded by the fact pre-COVID, we undertook a number of years of what we call elemental surveys. So if we were going to do a roofing programme, our stock condition surveyors would focus on identifying roofs that needed replacing, same for bathrooms, so on and so forth. We didn't do a comprehensive full stock condition survey, and ultimately we need that full survey for it to meet the requirements of what the regulator's looking for. So there are some historical kind of issues that have contributed to that. So since we have introduced our external provider to support our improvement plans, we're now up at around about 70% of our homes have received that full stock condition survey, including what we call an HHSRS inspection. That's the Housing Health and Safety Rating System, to identify any hazards. So that comprehensive survey, we're up at around about 70% in the last 5 years now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Haigh.
Yes, thank you. And talking about the tenant experience, it is really good to see some of those tenant satisfaction measures heading in the right direction. But obviously, as ward members, we often see where that's gone wrong, where people have not felt this has been satisfactory, or perhaps have not been able to get a response. I think sometimes that's because people are used to interacting with most of their services that they deal with in a very different way, and that might be they have different expectations than the service in the past. So what are we doing in order to reflect people's expectations of how they interact with the service? And I'm looking particularly at the metrics around satisfactions with the landlord's approach to handling of complaints, which is at 33%, which is quite low. And also satisfaction with the landlord's approach to handling of antisocial behaviour, 55%. I sure we would all like to see that being higher. And often feedback I think we all get from residents is that they have not actually been able to either speak to a human being or feel that their complaint or issue has been acknowledged and got feedback on how that's being dealt with. So I'd just be interested to see what we're doing to improve that.
Thanks, Councillor. If I'm understanding correctly, just what routes really, managing the expectations of what routes our tenants have to engage with us.
And feedback on what's happening, I think.
Super, thank you. Yeah, if I can just start, Mandy, and then I'll pick up on a couple of bits and then Mandy will supplement that, thank you. There are obviously multiple routes for our tenants to engage with us, not least through the hubs, obviously through the customer contact centre and various digital routes. We do an awful lot of work around the feedback that we do get and that kind of negative feedback that we get and learning from that. And I'm particularly thinking in cases such as complaints and the introduction of, forgive me, I think I've referenced this at Scrutiny Board previously, the introduction of our intervention team who are really focusing on that early intervention when we receive complaints. I say regularly, I think when a customer or tenant does present us with a complaint, they're not looking for a letter to land on the doorstep in 2 weeks' time. They're looking for something to happen, someone to speak to, and an outcome. So we've developed that team really with the permission, with the resources to make that difference early on in the process. And that's a model that we're looking to expand even further. Now we've proved that concept really and seen the success of that. That's something that we're looking to expand even further. And I'll just hand over to Mandy. Thank you.
Hi, so I'm Mandy Sawyer, Head of Housing and Neighbourhood Services in Housing Leeds, with responsibility for some of the strategy and policy, but also the social housing regulation. The TSM data, I mean, the percentages we report to you, there's an awful lot of other data that we can look at. So we do undertake customer profiling, property profiling, area profiling to really understand the breakdown of that satisfaction. Is it certain customer groups that are not satisfied? Is it certain areas that are not satisfied? And that enables us to do follow-up work in terms of whether there's further engagement that's needed on that subject area or certain engagement that's needed within those communities. We also have the comments, so there's comments, there's a comment box at the end of the TSM survey that provides the opportunity for feedback, and we do analysis of that, and it's really helpful now that we've got AI to support us with that able to monitor the changes quarter by quarter of some of that feedback from residents. But that feedback that I've just described and the analysis that we undertake from that feedback then informs our tenant engagement approach. So where we're not happy with the levels of performance, then it will, on an area-based approach, it will inform team service plans. So housing office service plans, priorities around the areas of it where they want to improve satisfaction. If it's a general area of dissatisfaction, so you mentioned complaints, for example, then that can help us to inform our approach to complaints. And through our complaints working group, which was a subgroup of the Leeds Housing Board, we're working with tenants constantly on how can we improve the way that we manage complaints.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. In terms of complaints and how they're managed, in fact, it's before getting to complaints. Why don't we use our housing offices in the hubs as a place where people can find out what's going on? So I think residents or tenants, if they went in, they'd like to be able to go to the hub and report a problem and then be able to go back in 2 or 3 days and find out what's going on if no one's been in touch. But because of the way our disconnected process seems to work, the housing officers don't always seem to know what the housing repairs team is going to do or is doing or has done or what went wrong. So they're having to ring multiple people or make multiple contacts, which is frustrating to them. So is there a reason why we don't use the housing office is that we've got as the one point of contact, or the preferred point of contact, rather than sending people on various contact centres and wherever else it is they have to go.
Thanks, Councillor. I think it's a really valid point, and it's something that we're acutely aware of, and I think it is an issue that specifically relates to repairs, and hugely mindful of the fact that that's an awful lot of contact, and I'm sure for members an awful lot of your casework as well. The issue that we currently have that we're trying to resolve is that our colleagues in housing offices effectively can see that first point of contact, so they can, if a repair's been raised, we can see that a repair's been raised, but then the kind of trail goes cold at that point, as our repair system interfaces with our service providers' repair systems, MEARS, LBS, for example, various other contractors, and we need access to that system until the repair's been completed. When it interfaces back with our system, if it's still in that process, we're a little bit blind to it, other than some of our specialist repairs teams who have access to those systems. So it is something that we're acutely aware of, and has an impact on the level of service that our customers see. So we're trying to work with our colleagues in IDS, with our IT system providers on how we can maybe do something a little bit better there, because we recognise that feedback, Councillor, and yeah, I think it is something that does need to improve.
Is that something we can maybe have a look at on the work programme later in the year to see how we're doing with it? Or is it going to be longer term than that? It's something that I think would make a huge difference. I mean, I know when I go into my meetings with the housing team, most of the time I know better than them what's going on in someone's house, because I've been in touch with the housing repairs responsive team or whatever it is, and so I know there's something going on. Sometimes the housing team don't even know there's been an issue. So for me, it's quite fundamental that you have a housing officer that can answer your question, and the interfaces should be in the back. The resident tenant shouldn't need to be able to see all the different things we've got going on. It's a bit like the Swan, isn't it? It should be seamless on the top, and whatever flapping around we're doing, we should be doing it in the background so people aren't bothered by that.
Councillor Khan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Chapman. And I think that's fantastic question you ask us. And I think what we can do is, going forward, we can have like a sub-working group to look into this separate as well. So I'm happy to get the elected members aboard as well and take it from there. And we can look into details how we can improve the repair. Improvement, and also see how we can get the IT in there as well. So we can dive in deeply into repairs.
Thank you, and Dr. Adamosi.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add on to Councillor Cowan's point, we've been discussing a lot, Councillor Chapman, around the integration within the housing service, and as part of the localities approach, we will have different areas that we will test, learn and grow, and test different hypotheses. So actually that's one really helpful point that we could look at, and so we'll be able to report back as well. So probably working with Councillor Khan to really think about those hypotheses around housing. One of these could be those, so we could feed back once we kick those off as well.
Many thanks all. Councillor Hills was next.
Yeah, just a couple more questions about data in the report. So page 34, with the reporting on increased demand for temporary accommodation, there's obviously reports, there's some detail in there, but I would just appreciate knowing how long on average those families are remaining in temporary accommodation, as in how temporary that accommodation is. If we could just have an average, and then ideally a worst case scenario as well, how long in the worst case people would be staying there, that would be great. And then my second question was about void properties, which is down on page 36. I'm assuming most of these are void due to repairs. It seems to be the case for the improvement of the asbestos situation. But how long are those repairs taking place on average? How long are those properties void? Is there anything we can do to improve that in future? Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hills, for the question. In terms of temporary accommodation and length of time, it is actually really difficult to give you an exact time. but generally you find that smaller families are able to move on quicker, and the larger families, particularly those with a 4 and 5 bed need, would be in temporary accommodation for longer periods of time. What you can see from the report is that we don't have families staying in bed and breakfast for more than 6 weeks, which is fantastic. A lot of authorities are not able to meet that target. So for us, families going into bed and breakfast is only when they have to, and for a very short period of time before they do move on into temporary accommodation. We are expanding on our temporary accommodation offer all the time. So families are going into self-contained accommodation where they have their own bedrooms, kitchen, bathroom and living area. So a lot of our work at the moment is about making sure that when families do go into temporary accommodation, families are able to cook for themselves, and have their own rooms and space, and that standard is as good as it can be. I think have to be honest in that the availability of social housing is declining, and that private rented accommodation in the city is very expensive. So whilst we still do fantastically well in terms of our move on for families, we do recognise that it is slower than we would like. It probably is just worth saying here as well that if you look at the amount of households per thousand that are in temporary accommodation in Leeds, it's about 2%. If you look at cities such as Birmingham and Manchester, it's 15 and 11%. So whilst that number is increasing for Leeds, it is still very, very low when you look at comparable core cities.
Thank you. If I could just respond in relation to the void properties, as you've seen in the report, Councillor, our target is 1% of our homes to be void, no more than 1% of our homes to be void at any one time. We will always have void properties as tenancies end, so on and so forth. We're equally aware that there is a financial incentive for us to get those properties let, but even more so, touching on the points that Kerry was raising, there's a huge demand for temporary for social housing, so we have a moral incentive to get the properties let as soon as we possibly can as well. Our target is has recently been amended to 70.5 days for a property to be in void, as you rightly pointed out, and I'm going to say all. Forgive me, there might be one or two exceptions where this is not the case, but in the vast majority of cases, all properties are being actively worked on. Obviously, we ensure that they are to our Leeds housing standard, and also a good opportunity for us to do investment work when a property is in void as well. So there's always that kind of balance around expediency, but also taking the opportunity to particularly really invasive works like a full rewire, for example, that is really invasive when someone's living in a home, is a good opportunity to undertake that kind of work when a property is in void, but obviously has a time impact as well. So our average performance is not meeting that 70-day target. We're up at just above 90 days at the moment. That has been impacted by the asbestos surveying process that we reference within the report, but we are making improvements. Again, at March we're just under 1.8% of our properties in void. We're now down to about 1.5%. So heading in the right direction, both in terms of the overall volume and also that turnaround time as well.
Thank you. Councillor Firth, you did have your hand up, but I also heard you say that you thought your question would be asked.
Unfortunately, I have got a separate question, but thank you very much. Could I ask on one particular point, further to Councillor Hill's point, two things. First of all, there's a lot of reference there to historic data. Could that be reflected in future reports? And if it takes time to provide the analysis, then if an appendix just providing the data could be provided, that would be helpful if it is something that's available. And also, more importantly, that when it comes to, you've just mentioned the 70-day target, when it comes to bringing voids back into service, could that be something that could be reflected in this report in the future, given that's quite a big factor in all of this and something that's quite readily raised by a lot of residents in particular because of the nature that they can see it right in front of them and therefore want to let us know about it. Could I ask one further question to that, which is one particular issue that I know that Kerry and colleagues have dealt with, particularly with me, is the number of unauthorised camps. Could I ask why there is no mention at all in this particular report about it? Is it because that normally it's a separate item that comes to this board, or is there anything that we can quantify from there? Thank you very much.
To the first two questions, yes and yes, Councillor. We can include the historical data and the performance against that 70-day target in future reports. I'm looking across at Ian, if that's all right, Ian, if I make that commitment on your behalf. With regard to the encampments, you know, I don't know why it's not included within the report. We do measure, yeah, and we do have some performance stats around that, so we can certainly include that in future reports as well, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of quick questions. It's good to see page 57 that tenant satisfaction is improving in terms of dealing with antisocial behaviour, positive contribution to neighbourhoods. I think what we're finding is that it's getting increasingly complicated, that we've got different vulnerabilities bouncing off against each other. We've got a particularly complicated case that's just come up where a tenant in one flat has access to turn somebody else's water off, which was a bit of a shock, and is using that for their own purposes, which we are following up on with the Housing Office. They are aware. But how we manage that increasing complexity, how do we take a trauma-informed response whilst tackling those big issues that our tenants are facing that are really impacting people's everyday lives? Be interesting to know what work is going on that. And then in terms of the stock, the review of the stock, if you have a block of housing, for example, or several blocks, I'm just thinking of one particular example, probably getting on for 100 years old, if there are recurring issues on a street with the properties, is anything then done rather than just the reactive response in terms of repairs? At what point does that trigger oh, actually, these roofs are giving way, they've all got water ingress through the porch, whatever it might be? How many would it take for it to trigger a bit more investigation? Does that make sense? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll pick up on the ASB first, Councillor. Thank you. We absolutely recognise the huge impact that these cases have on people's well-being, mental health, and how it can really impact their ability to enjoy their home in a peaceful manner. We work very closely with our colleagues in Safe Stronger Communities, the LASBAT team, very much a joined-up approach to managing cases of antisocial behaviour. I guess as the tenant satisfaction measures would indicate, there's room for improvement, and as Mandy mentioned previously, we take that feedback willingly and look to learn from how we can manage those cases a lot more effectively. As you rightly said, in the vast majority of cases, they can be extremely complex, and it does take time. And obviously, there are some restrictions around what we can and can't do to support tenants. But I think the one thing that we have learned a lot about is that need for ongoing communication. And even if that is a touch point to say, nothing material has developed since we last spoke, that need for regular communication is something that we're acutely aware of, and an awful lot of work taking place between both housing and LASBAT in particular around how we manage those cases and do that effectively. Your second question was around our kind of stock condition and how that translates into planned works. We don't necessarily have a threshold of if it's 20%, 30%. I think what we do try and do is take a planned approach to that kind of investment. Through our stock condition, obviously there are things that we identify that requires an immediate intervention, particularly if that relates to a hazard, and we have those processes in place. So we have those processes in place where we identify the need for an immediate intervention, but our preferred route. It's more efficient financially and in terms of kind of delivering a programme of work is to take a planned approach to that. So we do model that data based on, there are some kind of set criteria about how long we expect a roof to last or windows to last or all these different elements. So we do model that, and we have a combination of sort of preventative planned works on an annual basis that we always allow some capacity within those planned programmes to inject properties or schemes in throughout the year. So we have that kind of combination of a little bit more agile, but it's still a planned programme. So yeah, that's something that we both model proactively, but also have that degree of responsiveness as well.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. It's just to jump on I think it was your middle point, Councillor Thompson, around the complexities that we're seeing of residents living in social housing and the trauma-informed approach. And I've had the pleasure of meeting the team, and I feel they are very trauma-informed, work with empathy. They're very systemic in their thinking, and we've spoken about the fact that we want that to reflect in our strategies, in all that we do. But you're absolutely right with the complexities that are there. Housing is more than just the bricks and mortar, and just a perfect example is, whilst the stock condition is here and is something that's being worked through, so is an understanding of the tenants that we've got in the building. So those one-to-one visits, making sure that we're looking at mental health and all the other intersecting issues for residents is also part of the work that's taken on. So absolutely take that on board, and we could talk more about that in future scrutinies.
Thank you. I'm keen that we bring this shortly to a close. Councillor Chapman had one, and then Councillor Parnham after that, and then hopefully we'll wrap up.
Mine's going back to the contact for residents. A lot of the social housing is now provided by housing associations, and I know we have joined up. It's the bid site that's joined up, isn't it? So if you want to bid on a property, the housing association properties are on there. But that's when it starts to diverge. Is there any way we can work better with the housing associations so that their tenants are supported when things go wrong? So I've got a really good example. I'm not going to go into it here, but I've got a really good example of a tenant in a housing association that cannot get her damp and mould situation resolved, and it's gone all the way up to the MP, and it's just failed. But she's still one of my residents. And as it's all social housing, can we maybe link all that together? I'm thinking back to the place stuff that we've been talking about. And if there's anything we can do to work better with the housing associations, I think that would be beneficial to everybody.
I think you're right, Councillor Chapman. It very much lands in that kind of localities and how we can influence beyond our own immediate area of responsibility. I don't have the answer yet, but I had the pleasure of meeting with Councillor Khan last week for the first time in his capacity as executive member, and indeed as my capacity as chief officer, and that was something that Councillor Khan raised as an area that we could definitely improve upon. So we had a couple of follow-up conversations about that internally. Forgive me, it was only a couple of days ago that we had that, but we recognise the need to do more with our RP colleagues, registered provider colleagues, and happy to come back at a future date to kind of discuss what that might look like.
Thank you both. Councillor Parnham.
It's just going back on what Councillor Thompson mentioned about vulnerabilities, complex issues in our housing. I've got a couple of retirement life properties in Armley Ward. I'm involved in tackling both issues. The similar one in Anchor, so that refers to Councillor Chapman's, outside our direct control. But in both the retirement life, it's a similar issue, and I don't know if it's a city-wide, where we've got residents who are all together, the onus on tackling issues that come up, usually from people coming outside family members. It's all the onus is on the residents to sort of tackle, report, diaries, blah, 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 which I understand is necessary at the moment. But I'm just thinking, the onus really is on vulnerable adults who are scared. They're scared of reporting against these people who are using violence. And I just wondered whether we could maybe look at that ongoing as an issue, because it really is impacting our most vulnerable adults, and maybe streamline the process possibly, or is there something we can do to look at contracts? Because it's not necessarily the people who are living there, it's their family members who are coming in, and I just wanted to raise that, that's all.
Councillor Panham, if you want to share details with me, I'm more than happy to look into that for you. I mean, our general approach on antisocial behaviour is that we do ask residents to keep a record of what antisocial behaviour they're experiencing, because that really helps us to build a picture, but also if we then pursue any kind of enforcement action, that we need that evidence to be able to report. But it shouldn't be solely based on that. And we do have officers who are out and about. We have access to patrols and police officers who can intervene. So it should be a broader approach. So very happy to have a conversation with you outside this meeting.
No, I take your point, and police officers are involved, LASBAT, housing officers, but it's still kind of, you've got to do this if you want this to happen, you know, and I just think if we could somehow help the residents a little bit more, but it's just a comment really.
If I may, Chair, sorry, if you wouldn't mind, Council, just sharing, I appreciate it'll be those sort of specific cases, but that'd be really interesting to then, you know, is there anything we can learn from that and apply more broadly? That'd be useful. Thank you.
Great, many thanks all. So I just had a few comments building on what others have said, and then think we can move on. But again, many thanks to you and all your colleagues for your work. Something that's come up a couple of times in this. Oh, council. Yeah, okay. Something that's come up a couple of times both in the pre-meeting and the main meeting was again just about wanting to be able to compare ourselves with other equivalent local authorities. So, you know, the statistic around temporary accommodation, it's just really important to know that we're doing better than Manchester. And for us to be able to say to residents, we recognise they're real issues, but actually, of course, they're issues that are kind of across the city, across the country, and actually, you know, for us to be able to say, and for residents to be able to understand that actually, you know, where we are doing better, that, you know, compared to other local authorities, joking aside, it's a useful thing to be able to say. I also think, again, the historic data thing is something that came up in our meetings last week as well, about any number of these, to be able to say, you know, for example, with regards to void properties, to be able to say this is what it's looked like over the last 3 years, the last 5 years, whatever, and be able to point at particular things like COVID and say, you know, there's reasons. I think on the whole, if people understand the reasons behind things, then their frustrations, it doesn't go away altogether, but people understand much better. And I think void properties have come up, and I'm really interested as well as to whether we can just have a bit more complexity, if it's possible, to be able to say, you know, would it be a reasonable aspiration to say that 50% of properties are turned around within 30 days, another 25% are turned down within 60 days, whatever, and then to be able to compare ourselves against those metrics. So it would be about you working out what is somewhat, it's a stretch, but it's feasible, and then that gives us something, again, more tangible to be able to I suppose, all hold ourselves to account around. Just one other thing that I'd mention actually two other things. There's something as well about, and we talked about it in the pre-meeting last week. I'm just particularly interested around, I don't know if you'd simply describe them all or lump them together as emergency repairs, but for example, a situation that there's repairs that are annoying and there are repairs that have repairs that need to happen that have a huge impact. So a broken lift in a high-rise flat means that some people will be housebound, or you know, somebody's front door is broken down and therefore maybe they're living away from home or something. So I guess I'm particularly interested in lifts, but I wonder if there's a wider category around emergency repairs and our responsiveness on them. So that would be another one. And I suppose one other one. So and this goes right back to the original, like the introduction to this whole, the introductory comments and wanting to get better qualitative input. I suppose, so it's good that we're driving up responses from tenants, but I think it'd be also really important to try to work out how we can get better feedback from citizens coming into the hubs and the people, people's kind of satisfaction with how we are doing and the empathy you're experiencing or not within the hubs, for example. So that's a barrage of extra things as well. Any final comments? I was conscious that Councillor Khan also wanted to come in.
Yeah, just a final comment, Chair. Can I say thank you for chairing this scrutiny board, and also I want to thank the elected members for your questions and comments. And I just want to thank the officers for putting a lot of work in producing the reports for us and go into details. As you know, I'm the new exec member for housing, and we've got over 52 social houses we manage, and there are 28,000 people on our register for rehousing. And you will get some challenges within, you know, if you're managing 52,000 social housing. But however, going forward, I think we can work together, and I will make sure we get a better performance data. And what I've heard the comments this morning, and we will work with yourself, Chair, and the elected members, how we produce those performance data here as well. And also looking forward to working with you on the subgroup, looking at repairs as well, Chair. Thank you.
Did you have a final comment, Adam?
If you want. Forgive me, that sums it up perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, so many thanks for all the input so far on housing. We do just have the final section from Polly. So if I'm all right to hand over to you, Polly.
So I think we've just gone into afternoon, so good afternoon. I'm Polly Cook, I'm the Chief Officer for Climate, Energy and Green Spaces. I think we have less within the performance report for a couple of reasons. So one, we bring an annual report to Executive Board and here about the climate agenda and the carbon reporting. A lot of the carbon reporting takes longer to do, so we do that annually rather than on a more regular basis. And also there's a lot of work within that portfolio which is driven by sort of grant activity, and so there's not necessarily that annual trend or the historic data in the same way. And some of it also feeds through, so into, for example, Adam's portfolio around some of the work that they do on housing, so we don't double report. I wasn't going to dwell too much on the Leeds pipe networks because Lisa covered a lot of the stats within her update anyway, so which I suppose proves that we're integrated. And we've already discussed it here, but obviously happy to take any more questions on that. So the key one for us, which is the corporate KPI, and in a previous scrutiny board we talked about change, and that was about woodland creation. And obviously as time's gone on, that's becoming more challenging to deliver because of land availability. But what we're also seeing is a request from sort of residents and elected members about actually thinking about our spaces differently, and thinking about sort of biodiversity and different types of habitat. So our proposal in a previous scrutiny was that actually our KPI evolves and it becomes sort of woodland creation and BNG as a whole, as opposed to just the woodland side. So in the report it talks about what we've done towards woodland creation this year, and some of the the challenges we've had where we've had to do re-establishment, but we're kind of getting that all back under control now, so feel in a much more competent position on that. Also talks about the move away from chemicals and spraying, and that we're now moving towards mulch mats as a more sustainable way of maintaining our trees. And then it starts to talk about biodiversity net gain for the first time, and the 5 sites in that, and between those two we're probably at about 44 hectares, and the target's 50 hectares, but that is still quite a challenging target in terms of volume. So I'll stop there, and that just gives you a bit of an overview of what's included within the report for us.
Councillor Chapman, take it away.
This is probably going to sound a little bit garbled because I'm not sure how to phrase it. First of all, I guess what struck me in here, and I know this is measures and it's a performance report, but there's literally nothing about parks anywhere. I don't know what KPI I would suggest, but I would think there should be something monitoring how we're doing in our parks. How are our playgrounds? What's the accessibility like? Paths, safety for women and girls. Is there anything else? Oh, safety, actually, we brought it up in the pre-meeting. Safety for everybody in our parks and how to make them more usable at different times of the year. So there's something around there. I don't know what it is, but I think there's something missing because parks is a huge impact on our areas. I mean, it's the one place people can go. It doesn't cost them anything generally, apart from parking in some places. It's access to the outside. It's play for the children. It's a huge, important part of what we do, and there's no mention of it. And then I had a specific question just about the Section 106 agreements, where developers can offload their requirements onto someone else, what we require of them onto someone else to deliver. Who monitors those Section 106 agreements? To say, because I've got another example, which I won't mention, but other than broadly, is we've got some money and we've got a piece of land and something's supposed to happen to it. We know what we want to happen to it, but we cannot get it delivered because we run around in circles about where is the funding, who's going to design it, who's responsible for it, is it housing, is it planning, is it parks? So there's a big area around there about how we can deliver on some of this requirements from the developments that are going in our areas as well. There you go.
Thank you for that, and you're absolutely right about parks. And I should have also mentioned up front, we also bring an annual report about our green parks strategy, which from a parks perspective, so we don't have a KPI in the same way that you have for bins, where you're collecting that data in the same, it's quite difficult. But what we do have is something called the Leeds Quality Park Assessment, where we undertake an assessment each year to see how parks are improving. So it's a replica of sort of the Green Flag assessment, which we do at our biggest parks. And that's something that we carry out. And the other thing that we also do is accessibility assessments, and so we report on that. So I think that's due to come in March this year to the Scrutiny board. So that does pick up the overview of all parks. It also picks up on sort of playground improvements, playground assessments, so all the sort of things you mentioned. So apologies, I should have mentioned that up front as well. In terms of the Section 106, I'd have to understand the specific example. So in terms of sort of the absolute overview of Section 106, it sits with the planning department, and then that funding is provided to whoever. So for example, if it's Section 106 and it's to do with improvements to green space that's vested within my area, that funding will come across to us as a service to work with local ward members to deliver. If it was housing land or highways improvement or education, it would go to the relevant department. But obviously it's members that are driving what's done by that work. So if there's a specific example that you want to send me through the details, I'm more than happy to look at that. But that's how we normally work, and normally that is quite successful. So let me know the specific incident.
Yeah, thanks Polly. I think it's quite an assumption that members are being involved in some of this stuff, because it's completely irrelevant to this board, but we did lose all of that schools funding that was a Section 106 agreement because no one told us it was there. And I actually think parks are really good at telling us what Section 106 agreements we've got in funding, but nobody else does, which is a different board. But we're still struggling to get this particular activity done. We keep getting referred back to planning, but planning appear to wash their hands of it. The minute they've got a Section 106 agreement, they seem to think that's it, done. They've done their job, they've got a development, they've got a Section 106 agreement, off you go. And the integration there doesn't seem to be quite right, or it's not working for us. So we'll come and talk to you about our particular issue and see if we can make that one work.
Great, many thanks. I've just got a couple of comments as well to add. I guess, again, this loops back to the very foundation of wanting to try to get better qualitative kind of citizen feedback on a regular basis. And I guess something that strikes me a lot from this conversation is there is that, I used to do it, there is that portal where we seek citizen feedback on a number of things. No, it's not even commonplace. Maybe it's older than that. There's a thing where you sign up and you get emails, and just maybe it's not even. I did it about 10 years ago, and then I think I got busy. But anyway, but I suppose I suppose it'd be really interesting to try to, and I think this is where we're trying to head, but to try to set an aspiration which in itself would bring its own KPIs, which would be to say, how do we build city voice? How do we, and this is far bigger than parks, far bigger than pretty much everything we're talking about today, but how do you try to set an aspiration where 5%, 6%, 7% of the population are kind of signed up on, I don't know, like mailing lists or something, and then giving feedback, and if they fill the surveys out in a given month, they then get entered into a hat for some money or whatever. And that, where I'm going with this, that would give us the opportunity to start to build up a lot of data whereby you could say, you could have a given survey which would be, have you used, how many times have you been to the park a park in Leeds this year? Was that more or less than previous years? Or, when you go to the parks in Leeds, are you satisfied? Are you more or less or equally satisfied as you were previously? And that's data we don't have at the moment, but it might mean that in 5 years' time we're building up a whole load of extra data that would enable us to track more fully and would be able to help us to scrutinise ourselves and our work more fully. So there's something there about that. Another more specific thing that we could do sooner rather than later, I don't know, I suppose I'm particularly interested in allotments. I'm struck that there is, by all accounts, high demand for allotments, but I'm also struck that there are certain allotment sites which seem very underused, and maybe actually all the plots are allocated but people have just given up. But I suppose I'd be interested if some data could come to us as part of this performance management, which would be about quantifying how many of the allotment sites in the city or allotment plots are taken and how many as well we think are actually being used or not, something around that. And finally on this, I think it links with biodiversity. I'd be you were talking about doing less spraying around the green spaces, around kind of where we're doing tree planting. As I understand it, I think we're trying to do less spraying as well with chemical spraying around the streets and kind of weed suppression. And again, I'd be interested to know how we think we could try to quantify that as well, if that makes sense. But then at the same time, I'll come back to you in a minute, but then also that needs to be married with qualitative data, because then we might celebrate that we're doing less weed spraying, but we might get a whole load of qualitative feedback from people saying they're very upset about weeds growing everywhere. So a splurge of thoughts for you.
We obviously have the data on the allotments, so there's no issue with that, and we are coming to scrutiny specifically on allotments later in the year, so we can bring the data on that, and if we want to incorporate that in going forward, we could do. In terms of weed spraying, we are in terms of on sort of pavements and things, we're only looking to move away from that where community groups have sort of offered to step up to undertake that work, because at the moment we've got no other viable, from an economic perspective, to actually manage those weeds, and obviously they create other issues if we don't keep on top of them. So it's not, we haven't taken a corporate position that we're not doing it. It's where we've had specific areas where that people have said actually we will keep on top of that in order that you don't need to do that, just so we're clear on that. But we're very transparent in terms of what we do on weed spraying, and we have driven down the amount that we do across most parts of our work. And like we say, the tree planting is one where we thought that was viable, so we found an alternative option.
Councillor Firth.
Thank you very much indeed, and just wanted to ask further to that particular point. You mentioned about weeds there, in terms of what sort of quantifiable, how much have we brought down that particular service in terms of the situation, because it'd be interesting to see, given that it's something that we've not really heard very much about, and I appreciate we're also getting a lot more stories from residents about it, so it'd be interesting to hear. But my actual question was in relation to the woodland planting. Obviously there's mention here of previously planted sites then having to obviously be replanted. Do you mind me asking, given that we've set the target of planting millions of trees over a certain period of time, is it not in the future that we could provide that in the report about how many trees are planted a year, as well as also how big a site that we're actually planting, because those are the quantifiable targets that we're looking at. And also, more importantly, in terms of the pre-planted sites, the areas where we're having to go back and actually redo some work where maybe, unfortunately, the trees haven't taken as much as we'd like.
So I think previously we have provided that. I mean, the hectare total is in there, so it's a hectare target, not number of trees. So the 18 point something hectares is the annual target for this year. 18.5 hectares, so that's the equivalent of trees. So that's where it's WIPs, and I think it was 289 standards. So the measure is in hectares as opposed to specific number of trees. But we can provide data in terms of each individual site, what we've had to go back and do. We've got all of that data. So if people want that to be included, we certainly can do that.
Thank you. And just hopefully to wrap this item up, Councillor Chapman. Oh, well, I'll tell you what, we'll do Councillor Chapman then. Oh, go on then.
Can I just quickly ask, how big is your team in forestry with regards to trees? I mean, it's good to have trees, and I absolutely welcome to have more trees in the city. But how big is your team to maintain those trees, especially when elected members are asking for those trees to be trimmed and pruned?
So where new trees go in, they should be going into areas where actually the woodland management is less. There's funding within for the early woodland management, but you're putting them in areas where they're not overgrowing pavements and things like that, whereas at the moment the trees that people are asking for are where they're blocking houses. That's not where the sort of future sort of volume of trees is going in. So I don't think we should see an increase in issues from that perspective. In terms of size, I'd have to come back to you. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how many. It's not a massive team, as I'm sure you know. There's an officer-based team who deal with sort of the inquiries that come through, and then we have a mixed economy where we use external contractors and our own in-house team to actually manage the forestry. But if you want a specific number, I can come back to you.
Thank you. And yeah, just to finish off this item, Councillor Chapman also had a question.
It's more of a comment, probably. Can I add to the conversation we just had about weeds and so on? Ginnels. I'm being inundated with people asking for ginnels to be cleared. They seem to think it's my job to go out and chop them down because I did a couple. So there's something around there. I mean, obviously it's seasonal, so they've all exploded all at once. But do we not need to balance our resources so that we can actually deal with nature as it happens and not just have a flat level of people all the year a lot? You see what I mean? It's managing the resources to the demand, and ginnels are a nightmare at the moment. And then just on diversity gain, verges, I have brought it up before in council and so on. I know this service is underneath them, but other places do manage to plant things in verges, and I think it would help us resolve problems with highways and people parking on them and making them look a mess, and at the same time get us some more net gain on biodiversity. If it's something we could look at longer term maybe, or ideally shorter term.
Thank you. So just as we're bringing this section to a close, I mean, Councillor Khan, Councillor Dibson, you have had the opportunity to comment. Is there more you want to say?
I mean, it's all been covered really by the officers. I'd just like to have on record a huge thank you to the workforce that worked so hard to deliver what are fantastic services for our city. You know, you heard from the refuse team that the scale of the task that they have to do. 500,000 bins, 500,000 bins a day, or a week rather. And with a high success rate. But I do take on board some of the comments that have been made here around better, more accurate reporting of where there are missed bins. And there is work afoot in terms of redesigning or re-looking at the service to make it more locality based. You heard what I had to say about comms in terms of fly tipping and being more proactive on fly tipping around comms, and perhaps looking at how we can work with community committees on things like CCTV. And point taken as well with regards to the importance of parks and not being in the report, and we'll make sure that doesn't happen again. But you know, I'm sure most members here will recognise the fantastic work that's been taking place in our parks from Improve Our Parks. Anybody that's been up to Temple Newsome recently, anybody who's been up to Lotherton soon when you go up to Golden Acre as well. There are and more improvements at Roundhay as well to restrict access and make sure that no unauthorised access goes on. So there's a lot of improvements citywide in our parks, and they are the crown jewel in our services, and I'm sure that the public recognise that as well. But totally accept what you say in terms of making sure that we have the data quantify that data to make sure that we're doing the right things. The only thing that I would say is that obviously parks, my experience of parks is they work very closely with members, friends of groups, and other volunteers and stakeholders to make sure that any interventions or improvements or upgrades to parks or any changes to parks are always led by from bottom up and serve the communities. So whilst we obviously need to make sure that we're gathering as much data as possible, a lot of that work does get done earnestly. So, but other than that, no, nothing else to add. Thank you.
Great. I was going to bring it to an end, but Councillor Barker hasn't had the opportunity to speak in this section. So,
one very quick point. We're going on to really dry times, and I've been through a few parks. And in theory, we're supposed to ban barbecues and stuff. Temple Newsham, there's a sign about that big that nobody is ever going to see. At Middleton, there's not one sign in all of Middleton that says ban barbecues. And when we do put the sign, if they're going to be that big, no, we just need something more larger, because there's thousands and thousands of acres that if we go up in flames, we're in deep trouble. But fire engines and stuff like that.
Use the mice money. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, point taken, and you know, obviously some of the other councillors mentioned that there is an opportunity there to use mice, but Polly will be able to explain the details around the bylaws and enforcement, and who can enforce the bylaws, and some of the risks that are involved in that in terms of sending park officers to be able to enforce it. But I mean, I totally agree. There's nothing worse than when you go on, say, Soldiers Field, and there's some patches or whatever, people that have been irresponsible using those horrible disposable barbecues and just putting them on grass. But we're looking at it. But I'll let Polly explain the detail.
well, I think what I'd suggest actually, because that doesn't really tally with what we're doing specifically here around performance management. I think it's something that we should hold on to and put into the work programme. Yeah, and so it can be part of the annual review. But I'm conscious we're already well over half an hour beyond, and yeah, I think it falls outside the scope of performance management. So many thanks to all who have contributed to this. I suppose the thing I would say is that as and when other things, I clearly think it's crucial and fundamental that we can keep holding ourselves to account and have this good mutual accountability with officers. And so if other matrices, whatever, other measurements come to mind, please do bring them. And just because they've not been part of that conversation, I'm sure we can keep feeding them into officers to make sure that when they bring intelligence to us and information and data to us, it can be in the most usable possible form. So do we need to accept that, or we just, that's...
Yeah, it's to note.
Yeah, so we are just
we'll pick up the other actions.
Yeah, we are noting that, and we've got a whole load of actions. We are now just going to move briefly into the work programme discussion. If people can stay around, please do. If you need to get off, please do. Councillor Haigh?
Yes, there's a proposal that we discussed before about bring the work programme for this very reason earlier in the agenda, so we can just briefly make sure that we're on board with that. And I'd like to propose that we do that in future. And also we did pick up the bringing back the academics to talk about how we're measuring qualitative experience, so if that could be popped in somewhere. Thank you.
Sorry, moving on to section 9 then. Becky, do you just want to introduce this as per?
Yeah, the work programme will come to you each meeting. It's obviously member owned for you to determine how you shape your work for this year. It at the moment includes your known items of business, so that's things like the performance monitoring and also the budget consultation. And if there are issues that have been referred to you from, for example, Executive Board, it also includes recommendations from members of the former Environment, Housing and Communities Board, which I know are sort of being in the process of being reviewed. There's flexibility in there to incorporate additional work as the board sees fit if you want to feed that through on an ongoing basis. I have picked up the stuff that's been mentioned already in the performance report, so around the repairs, around the recycling data, and the issues around performance management, and I'll pick up with Ian Strickland to build that into the next report for January.
Thank you, Becky. So yeah, so just briefly, if people want to people want to highlight particular issues that need to be part of the work programme, please speak now. Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. I think that one thing that was quite evident, given that it wasn't included in today's information, a particular look at unauthorised traveller camps across the city is a big issue, especially given the prevalence across a wide range of different areas, particularly our parks and private estates, among other areas.
Many thanks, Councillor Akhtar.
Can we also add graffiti onto the work as well, please, for the this municipal year? Because I think it was discussed about a few years ago, where the police turned around and they said it's not one of their top priority. But I think we need to bring the graffiti back again, because it is causing a lot of stress and the health and well-being to our local residents, where the issue is in some part of the city.
Many thanks. Councillor Hills.
True. Could we consider adding progress towards the homelessness targets in the city to the work order? Because I think the homelessness strategy applies between 2023 and 2028, so it'd be good to have like a mid-point review of that kind of thing.
Any more? Councillor Chapman?
Could we include in the maybe an update on the locality working that you're developing? Could we include parks teams in that? Yeah. Okay. That's okay. I just think they could work really well with the cleaner neighbourhoods teams to make things more efficient and better. And then if there's anything we can do at looking at the housing estates and how we, not the houses, because we've talked about that to death, but the actual environment that the houses are in, because I have to say they're tatty and quite dangerous at times, and not particularly nice places sometimes to be. So the more we can give people a pride in where they live, the better it will become. So I don't know how we develop that as a work programme, but I'm guessing you're probably already on it. But an update on that at some point would be helpful. What about employee survey satisfaction? I can't remember what the survey is called. Is it the Pulse? The staff surveys. Do we? Yes, but if we have got, I get that, but if we've got, okay, so related to high numbers of vacancies at times, James has gone, but where we've got high vacancies and we're slow to recruit, that must be having an impact on the morale of our staff. Do we not consider that at all? Because it impacts onto the services may be providing, because I don't know, the sick absence goes. I know there are certain teams under a lot of pressure, and that would feed back into the delivery in our areas for the services they're supposed to provide. But if it's strategy and resources, it's fine. I can go there.
All I was going to say, Councillor Chapman, is what I would probably suggest is that we do some sort of link up with the staff survey as it goes through strategy and resources, so we can do, to avoid some duplication and avoid officers coming to multiple meetings, if we could have a representative go to that meeting to represent this service area at the strategy and resources discussion, if that was satisfactory.
And then just, I know I touched on it earlier, but can we look at verge management? Is that ours or is it highways? Like verge management strategies. I don't know where it sits. Is it highways?
But no, these guys do it. These guys cut them. It's run through
highways. Verges. No, verge. Verges, grass verges.
Bird management strategy.
How do you manage birds?
How do you deal with the swallows compared to the robins?
Well, there are ways, but no, verges, green verges on the side of roads. So how do we deal with the ones that look horrific? Because everyone uses them as a parking spot, and is that right? Should we do something about making that a more permanent feature? But also, how can we, where people really do want verges and they are beneficial, which lots of verges are, is there something we can do? I have been through this loop before with what was it called? Trees for Streets, but we didn't get anywhere. But you don't have to plant a tree. You could plant a small bush and it would still make the area better visually. Well, that's part of having a verge management strategy, isn't it, to work that out?
Okay, so obviously the work programme is an ever-evolving document, so please talk to me or Becky anytime about how we can keep shaping that. And obviously we're thinking about this current municipal year, but the work of the Scrutiny Board will continue forever, hopefully. So we can keep shaping that together. And also your colleagues not on the not on this Scrutiny Board as well. It'd be great to just make sure that we are getting their wisdom being fed into this board as well. I just wanted to raise a few things. These are things that came up with conversations prior to today, but I think it's important to try to get it on the record, which was around woodland management. So there are kind of external kind of people like tree surgeons, etc., who feel that they really want to work with Leeds City Council to help us think about how we manage our woodlands better. This is about established woodlands as opposed to kind of new woodland that we're creating. I gather that play within our green spaces, and that strategy has previously come to the Scrutiny Board. It would be good to get updates on that. Air quality was something that I thought would be a really key thing to be brought to this Scrutiny Board, but the suggestion is that actually all the indicators are that that as a city all the measurements are going in the right direction. So the proposal would be that we get some kind of written report so that we can look at it and look at that data and hopefully be satisfied. There was also a discussion with housing about particularly looking at lodging, the whole idea of that there are thousands and thousands of spare bedrooms in the city and how do we tap into them as part of our housing strategy. And then a personal passion of mine is around vineyards, and that would be something that would cross over between perhaps this board and also the infrastructure and investment. So in certain communities like Beeston and Hare Hills and Burley, they are kind of a real challenge, but also maybe they present an opportunity as well. So there's plenty more for us to go at. I also just wanted to highlight some headlines that I'm going to raise here and we can discuss more if we want. As discussed, I'm really, really keen that we absolutely have lots of external voices coming in. So if you see particular items coming up in the work programme and you know people or kind of, I suppose, experts who are able to come and speak well into those fields, please talk to us. I'm really interested in long-termism. So the idea, but that with being that within any given sector, we'd think about, what might this what might this look like in 10 years' time? What might it look in 20 years' time? And how do we make those steps in the short term start to craft that long-term future? And finally, and again we have touched on this with the whole idea of citizen voice, but wanting to make sure that we have, I suppose, the whole idea of how do we build a more active citizenship? How do we catalyse and inspire citizens everywhere to feel more invested and to be more active in the life of our city? Because that alone is the single gear shift that would make huge impact across our communities on many, if not all, of these issues. So some headlines. Just to wrap up then, Councillor Haig.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you what you meant by looking at vineyards, because are you looking at that waste arrangements, which I would really be keen to look at non-traditional or non-standard waste arrangements, but that's not just vineyards, because we have flats with communal bins, we have hand bins, bag collections, a whole range of things, all of which have big issues. Or are you specifically wanting to look at vineyards, which is quite niche for certain parts of the city?
So by vineyards, I mean it is relatively niche, except in those communities it's a huge thing. So in the terraced communities like Beeston Hill or Hare Hills, they used to be where the old toilets were originally when they were built, and then they became known as vineyards because people kept their bins in there. To a large extent, people don't keep their bins in there, but they're still called vineyards. But they have a huge environmental impact on the community because they are often an absolute epicentre for fly tipping, or at best they kind of look unkempt and like void spaces in the heart of the community. So whether or not it comes to the Scrutiny Board is another question, but certainly for communities like Beeston Hill and Hare Hills and Burley, they are a really, really big issue.
Yeah, it's not that I'm unaware of vineyards, and we have them in my ward as well, but we have a range of non-standard waste collection that are really problematic. So if we are going to look at it, I'd like to look at the whole range rather than just vineyard, because I do think that is a bit too specific.
Okay, thank you. Was it Councillor?
Thank you. Further to that point, I had two further things very quickly. First one is ongoing review of for example, the Keep Hare Hills Tidy and other similar schemes. Keep Barnby Tidy was a scheme as well. Looking at the reviews of those, in particular, and the impact of those, because they seem to go on for a very long time, and we don't actually see the actual metrics of what they're actually achieving, because there's a lot of work going on there, and actually to see what differences are happening as a result. And the second point is, as has been mentioned in the meeting about the role of volunteers, would it be quite helpful for the board to have some point where friends of groups, I name the Friends of Temple Newsham, the Friends of Roundhay Park, you name it, those groups are a key part in terms of actually supporting us here on the council, and maybe they're people that we could have quite an interesting viewpoint from, given their particular interactions with the council.
Thank you. Perfect. So many thanks to you all. As I said, this is not the end of the conversation. This is just the beginning. So yeah, just if we can all just note the draft work programme such as it is. Becky will be scheduling additional items highlighted as part of this discussion into the work programme, and I'm sure Becky and I are open to all further discussions into the future. So final item, the next meeting of the Scrutiny Board is on at 10:30 a.m. on Monday the 20th of July, and there'll be a pre-meeting beforehand at 10 a.m. Many thanks again to you all, and see you again soon.